I guess the moment everything shifted was the same moment I wished I'd looked away. Because when your girlfriend's best friend holds your face and whispers, "I love you," more than she does, you can't just pretend the world stays in place after that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This all started months before that night, before anything even remotely wrong had happened. Back when I still thought I understood boundaries. Back when she was just Sarah, the woman who dropped by the repair shop with a busted laptop and a laugh that made me stand up straighter without knowing why. It was early evening then, the kind of slow hour where the shop felt too quiet and the fluorescent lights hummed louder than the customers. I remember brushing crumbs off the counter, pretending not to watch her pace near the entrance while she talked on the phone. She had that way of moving, confident, but like she carried a weight she didn't want anyone to offer help with. She hung up, exhaling sharply, then walked toward me. "Do you fix attitude problems too?" she asked, tapping her laptop with two fingers like it had personally offended her. I laughed before thinking. "Depends. Is it the device or the owner?" She raised an eyebrow, dry, amused, sharper than I expected. She didn't smile, but her eyes did. Both, apparently. Most people bring broken things and impatience. She brought mystery and something else I didn't have a name for back then. Something that felt like she already knew I'd overthink this conversation later. I took the laptop from her hands, and for a second, just a second, her fingers brushed mine. Lightly, not flirtatious, not deliberate, but enough to make me swallow before speaking. She noticed. Of course she did. "You're jumpy," she said, voice softer now. "No, just a dusty keyboard." I cleared my throat, though her hands had been steady, clean, and warm. She gave that kind of half smile that people give when they're deciding whether to tease you or let you breathe. She chose the second, which for some reason made my shoulders tense even more. While I ran diagnostics, she didn't wait at the counter like normal customers. She wandered around the shop, studying old electronics like they were paintings. She paused near a shelf of vintage cameras and looked back at me. Not quick, not shy, just looking, as if she was trying to understand something I didn't know I was showing. "How old are you again?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. 22. Right. She nodded once, thoughtfully, almost to herself. "You seem younger when you talk, older when you're quiet." I didn't know what to do with that, so I pretended the laptop fan was more interesting. She leaned closer, close enough that I caught the clean, understated fragrance she always wore. Something calm, something that didn't match the sharpness of her eyes. "You're good with your hands," she said, watching the tools arranged neatly beside me. Detail-oriented. The screwdriver slipped. Not dramatically, just enough for her to notice and tilt her head in quiet amusement. "I wasn't flirting," she added, though the corner of her mouth betrayed something playful. "I didn't say you were. You didn't have to." She let that hang there. Not teasing, not challenging, just hanging. When I finished fixing the laptop, she didn't take it right away. She rested her hand on the counter, fingers tapping in a regular rhythm, like she was debating something and losing to it. "Thanks," she said finally. Simple, short, but her tone, there was a warmth in it she hadn't used with me before. And as she turned to leave, she glanced over her shoulder. Not long, not dramatic, just a half-second longer than people normally look. Something unspoken passed between us in that sliver of time. A spark, a question neither of us should have asked. I told myself it meant nothing. But walking home that night, I kept replaying that glance, that tap of her fingers, that almost smile. And I still don't know why, but it was the first moment I couldn't stop thinking about. The second time I saw her wasn't planned. Not like she'd suddenly become a fixture in my life. She wasn't the kind of woman you run into. But it happened anyway. It was a week later, late afternoon, the hour when the repair shop felt like a warm, dusty box with too many blinking devices and not enough air. I was sweeping metal shavings off the floor when the front bell chimed. I didn't look up right away. I just said, "We're open," the way I always did, flat, distracted. Then I heard her voice. "Good. Because I need someone who won't make me feel stupid for not knowing how wires work." I froze with the broom midair. She stood there holding a tangled mess of charging cables in one hand and a travel mug in the other. The mug looked like it hadn't been washed in days. The cables looked worse. Sarah, I said before I could stop myself. She blinked, a little surprised I'd remembered her name. Or maybe surprised that I said it like it mattered. Tried to fix this myself, she said, lifting the cables slightly. But apparently I just made it angry. I took them from her, feeling a small static shock as our fingers brushed again. Not electricity, something warmer, softer. The kind that lingers a second too long in the air afterward. She didn't hold my gaze this time. She looked around the shop instead, rubbing her thumb along the rim of her mug like she was trying to soothe herself. You look tired, I said without thinking. Her eyes snapped to mine, not offended, just startled. Vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. That obvious? She asked quietly. Only if someone's paying attention. She huffed a laugh, small, real. Long week. People drama, work drama, life drama. The usual. But the way she said it, the usual sounded like a weight she'd stopped trying to put down. I pretended to focus on untangling the cables, but I kept watching her from the corner of my eye. The faint tremor in her fingers as she sipped her coffee. The way her shoulders rose a little too high when she breathed. How she didn't quite know what to do with her hands once the mug was empty. She walked behind the counter without asking. Something she shouldn't do, something I should have stopped her from doing. But she moved like she needed a place to stand that wasn't the rest of her life. What's that? She asked, pointing at a circuit board. I explained badly. She smiled like she appreciated the effort more than the explanation itself. You talk fast when you're nervous, she said. I coughed. I'm not nervous. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, but gently, as if she didn't want to embarrass me for it. A silence stretched between us, not tense, just aware. She was close enough that I could see the faint crease at the corner of her mouth, the kind people get from holding in things they never say aloud. You ever have one of those days, she murmured, where you wish someone would just, she shook her head. Never mind. My fingers paused in the cables. No, say it. She hesitated, the guard slipping for half a breath. Where you wish someone would notice you're not as okay as you act. The words hung heavy, bare. I didn't touch her, didn't move closer, but I looked at her long enough, steady enough, that she finally looked away. Sarah, I said softly. She swallowed, straightened, and lifted her mug like a shield. The moment should have ended there. It didn't. As she turned to leave, her hand brushed the back of mine. Barely, unintentionally, but she didn't pull away right away. Just that tiny hesitation. Just enough to feel like a promise neither of us should have made. The third time wasn't supposed to be anything. Just a quick fix, she'd said over text. Except it turned into the kind of late evening that feels too fragile to talk about normally. The rain had started halfway through the repair, soft at first, then heavier, turning the windows into sheets of trembling water. We were both stuck in the shop until it died down. The lights buzzed faintly above us, the air warm with the smell of soldering metal and her perfume. Clean, understated, the same one that somehow made the room feel smaller. She sat on the stool beside my workbench, knees almost touching mine. Too close for comfort, too far for anything else. She kept tapping her fingers on her knee, stopping when she caught herself, then starting again. You always stay here this late? She asked. Only when someone's tech emergency shows up after hours. She shot me a look. I didn't force you to. You didn't have to. That made her inhale, slow and uneven, like she wanted to respond but didn't trust herself to. The shop felt eerily quiet, except for the rain. She shifted on the stool, her shoulder brushing mine briefly. I kept working, pretending not to notice how warm that brief touch felt. You ever avoid going home? She asked suddenly. I didn't expect the question, or the soft crack in her voice. Sometimes, I admitted. Why? She didn't answer at first. She just stared at the window, watching the rain blur the outside world. Some nights, she whispered, I walk slower to my door. Like if I drag it out long enough, maybe the house will feel less empty when I finally open it. I set the screwdriver down. Carefully. That sounds lonely. It is. She didn't sugarcoat it. There was a long pause. She didn't look at me. I didn't look away. And then her phone buzzed. The sound was sharp, cutting the moment clean in half. She flinched, grabbed the phone, and turned slightly away from me as she answered. What do you want now? Her voice dropped, tired, impatient, too raw for a casual call. I didn't mean to overhear, but she wasn't exactly subtle. A man's voice bled through faintly. I caught tense fragments. No, I said I'm fine. It's not your business anymore. Stop calling me this late. Her shoulders curled inward. Defensive. Aching. I looked at my hands, trying not to let something unfamiliar tighten in my chest. When she hung up, she didn't speak. She stared at the floor, fingers digging into her palms. You okay? I asked gently. She laughed once, short, brittle. That's a complicated question. She slid off the stool and leaned against the workbench beside me, close enough that I could feel her warmth along my arm. Neither of us moved away. You don't have to tell me, I added. That's the problem, she murmured. I kind of want to. Her voice cracked on the last word. Something pulled inside me, something I wasn't ready to name. I wanted to reach for her hand. I didn't. I kept mine flat on the bench, gripping the edge until my knuckles tightened. She noticed. Her eyes dropped to my hand, lingered, then moved to my face. For a moment, just a breath, we leaned slightly toward each other. Not enough to be a choice, just enough to feel the shift in the air. I could feel her breath, warm, unsteady. Then, the lights flickered. The rain thundered harder. Her phone buzzed again. She closed her eyes, exhaling in frustration. And I stayed perfectly still, caught between the urge to pull back and the stronger urge not to. The rain finally eased, but neither of us moved. The shop felt suspended, like time had paused just long enough for us to hear our own breathing. She was still leaning against the workbench, close, her arms folded, but it wasn't a defensive posture this time. It felt more like she was holding herself together. Her phone lay face down on the counter between us, screen still glowing from the last call. She stared at it like it might explode. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what I was allowed to say. She let out a slow breath. This is getting strange. Her voice was careful, measured, like she was afraid of the sound of it. I swallowed. Strange how? You know how, she whispered. Her eyes lifted to mine, not seeking answers, just acknowledging a truth we'd both been dodging. The air between us tightened, heavy with all the things we hadn't dared name. A long silence stretched. A real one. Not awkward. Not shy. Just revealing. I don't understand what's happening, I said, surprising myself. My voice came out softer than I meant it to. She stared at me for a long time before replying. Neither do I. And that scares me. There it was, raw honesty. No shields, no jokes, no half-smiles. She looked away first, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear with a trembling hand. You're too young for this kind of mess, she murmured. You say that like I'm not already in it. Her eyes flicked back to me. A flicker of something, fear? Recognition? I couldn't tell. This isn't normal, she said. You and me, talking like this. Sitting here like this. I almost asked why, but the answer was obvious. She was my girlfriend's best friend. I was supposed to be background noise in her life, a polite nod at gatherings, a wave across a room, someone she never thought twice about. Yet here we were, late at night, in the glow of the shop lights, barely inches apart. What are we doing? She finally asked. Her voice cracked on the last word. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. I don't know. That's not true. Her stare sharpened, painfully perceptive. You do know. You just don't want to say it, because if you say it, it becomes real. My chest tightened. And if you say it? She let out a trembling laugh. Then I'm in deeper than I meant to be. Another silence. Longer. Heavier. She took a small step closer, maybe accidental, maybe not. Our arms brushed, a faint, slow glide of fabric against fabric. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. Her breath hitched. Just barely. But I felt it. You're making it hard to pretend this is nothing, she whispered. I'm not doing anything. You're here. She swallowed, looking almost angry at her own confession. You listen. You look at me like you see something I stopped showing people years ago. I didn't know how to respond. So I didn't. I just held her gaze, letting the silence speak for me. She closed her eyes for a moment, like that made it safer. When she opened them again, they were shinier, tired, unsure, but open. This shouldn't feel like a relief, she said quietly. What? You, she breathed. Talking to you. It feels like finally exhaling. Something in me pulled taut, like I'd been waiting for her to say that without knowing it. She looked at my mouth for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, except I noticed everything with her now. Then she whispered the line that broke something in me. Something small but irreversible. I don't know how to go back to pretending you're just a kid I'm supposed to ignore. I thought the night had already reached its breaking point. I thought nothing else could tilt the ground under us more than what she'd already said. But then she reached for her phone. Not to check messages. Not to answer another call. She just picked it up, turned it over in her hand, and stared at the screen like she was debating whether to let me see something she'd kept locked away. "You remind me of someone," she said finally. I froze. Someone good or someone bad? She didn't smile. She didn't tease. She just sighed, a slow, careful release of breath. Someone I shouldn't have lost. Her voice was low, a little rough, like the words scraped on their way out. She slid her thumb across the screen and opened her gallery. I wasn't trying to look, but she tilted the phone slightly in my direction, as if she needed someone else to hold the weight with her. A picture filled the screen. A man, mid-30s maybe, soft eyes, a half-smile that looked like it had been coaxed out of him. His arm was around her shoulders. She wasn't smiling with her mouth, but her eyes were bright, almost young. I didn't know who he was, but the air shifted, tightened. "He looks," I began, not knowing how to finish. "Like you," she offered. "A little, but that's not it." She locked the phone again. "I dated him for 2 years," she said. "We were close. Not perfect, but close." She brushed her thumb along the cold metal counter, a small, repetitive motion. "He passed away 3 years ago. Heart attack. 38. My breath caught. I didn't expect that. Not from her. Not from the way she carried herself. So put together, so sharp, so controlled. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. She shook her head. "I don't want sympathy." "What do you want?" She inhaled, deep, shaky. "Honesty." I waited. So she gave it to me. "When I talk to you, when you look at me the way you do." She stopped, swallowed hard. "It scares me because I don't know if I'm reacting to you, or to the ghost of someone I never learned to stop missing." A quiet confession. Not dramatic. Just human. Bare. I didn't look away. Couldn't. "And I don't want to use you as a replacement," she whispered. "You don't deserve that." My fingers tightened on the edge of the bench. "I'm not him." "I know." Her voice softened. "That's the problem." Another storm settled between us, quieter than rain, heavier than thunder. She reached out suddenly, not to touch me, but to rest her hand near mine. Not close enough to be a gesture, not far enough to be unintentional. "You talk like him," she said, eyes fixed on our almost touching hands. "But you're gentler. You listen more." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "You look at me like you're seeing the parts he never bothered to." I didn't know what to say to that. Everything inside me felt unsteady. Finally, I whispered, "Tell me if this is too much." "It is," she said, "and I can't walk away." She looked up, and something in her expression, raw, stripped bare, made the room feel impossibly small. Then she shifted her hand a tiny inch closer, the faintest motion, barely anything. But it was enough to make something inside me fracture. Slowly, cautiously, like she was afraid of what it meant, she let her fingers graze mine, just a whisper of contact. And in that brief touch, something changed. Something quiet. Something irreversible. After her fingers grazed mine, neither of us moved. Not because we were afraid of crossing a line, but because the line had already blurred, softened, disappeared somewhere between the silence and everything we hadn't said. We stayed like that for a long moment, the faint warmth of her touch seeping into my skin. No lightning bolt, no cinematic swell, just two people breathing a little too carefully in the stillness of a repair shop that suddenly felt too intimate for what it had witnessed. "Sarah," I said quietly, don't say anything yet." Her voice was thin, fragile in a way I'd never heard from her. "Just let me think." She pulled her hand back, slowly, reluctantly, but she didn't move away. Instead, she sank onto the stool beside me, elbows resting on her knees, head bowed, hair falling forward like a curtain shielding her from the world. Except I was still in her world. And she didn't push me out. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she murmured. It wasn't a confession. It was a wound she was offering me to see. I don't either, I replied. But pretending nothing's happening isn't protecting anyone. Her laugh was barely there. Soft, sad, almost grateful. You're too young to be this honest. You're too tired to keep pretending. She looked up at me then, slowly, as if lifting her gaze cost her something. Her eyes were glassy but steady, holding mine with a kind of exhausted courage. This, whatever it is, it shouldn't feel like relief, she whispered again, echoing her confession from earlier. But it does, I said. She exhaled, one of those deep, uneven breaths that carry weeks' worth of restraint. Her shoulders finally dropped, like she'd been holding them up for years. There's something dangerous about you, she said. But it wasn't an accusation. It sounded almost peaceful. What's that? You're gentle in a way that makes me want to unlearn all the parts of myself I buried. She gave a small shake of her head. You make quiet feel safe. I haven't had that in a long time. I didn't step closer. I didn't reach for her. I just stayed, steady, present, letting the silence between us fill with something softer than tension. I don't know where this goes, she continued. I don't know what we're inviting in. But I also know I'm tired of running from things that make me feel alive again. Her voice broke slightly on alive, like she wasn't sure she had the right to feel it. I swallowed the ache forming in my chest. So what do we do? She breathed out slowly, her gaze dropping to my hands again, steady, open, waiting. We start by not lying to ourselves, she said. We stop pretending this is coincidence, or harmless, or accidental. Her hand moved again, the smallest shift. And this time, she didn't hesitate. Her fingertips brushed the back of my hand, then rested there, lightly, as if testing whether the world would fall apart if she allowed herself this one honest touch. It didn't fall apart. It rearranged itself quietly around us. We didn't kiss. We didn't reach for more. We didn't need to. We just sat there, two people finally brave enough to admit that whatever lived between us was real. Her head dropped gently against my shoulder. Not romantic. Not desperate. Just truth. Soft, earned, inevitable. And in that quiet collapse, with her weight settling into me like trust, she whispered the only thing that could close the night with finality. I'm not ready to walk away from you anymore. I'm telling this from a distance now, months later, maybe years, depending on the angle of memory. Time sanded down the sharpness of that night, but not the meaning of it. Some moments don't fade. They just settle deeper, like stones at the bottom of a river, still shaping the current long after they've stopped moving. What happened between us wasn't dramatic. No sweeping confessions, no fireworks, no cinematic kiss at the stroke of midnight. Just a quiet shift, the kind you only recognize when you look back and realize your life tilted on its axis a little. After that night, everything changed in ways that were almost invisible. We didn't suddenly become a couple or start speaking in the language of lovers. Instead, we just stopped lying. Not to each other. No, we had never lied there. We stopped lying to ourselves. I noticed it in the way she'd look at me a second too long, not with tension anymore, but with a kind of gentle knowing. And I felt it in myself, this strange peace whenever she entered a room, like something in me had finally found its alignment. Not a missing piece, just a place that felt right. And she softened too, not in weakness, but in presence. She began letting people in, slowly, selectively, but I saw the shift. The way she breathed easier, the way she didn't brace as much, the way she stopped expecting the world to take something from her every time she cared. For me, I learned that love, real love, isn't always the loud thing. Sometimes it's the quiet permission to be seen. Sometimes it's the willingness to stay when everything in your past taught you to run. She taught me that. Or maybe she unlocked something I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten it ever existed. We didn't promise each other forever. That would have cheapened what we were becoming. Instead, we made a different kind of promise, an unspoken one. To show up fully. To stay honest. To let the connection grow or shift or reshape us without forcing it into a mold it didn't fit. And the truth? We did fall in love. But not all at once, and not in any way that would make sense on paper. It wasn't a cliff we jumped off. It was a shoreline we walked toward, step by step, sometimes quietly, sometimes clumsily, but always together. Looking back now, I think the biggest lesson was this. Love isn't the moment you realize you can't live without someone. It's the moment you realize you don't want to. And in that stillness, after all the tension, the restraint, the unsaid words, we finally understood each other without needing to speak. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?